My new work has been released. Welcome everyone to read my work in tomato novel. I hope everyone can enjoy it. Your attention is the driving force behind my writing, and I will strive to tell every story well. The story is a bit long, telling the emotional entanglements of two generations over several decades. Whether it's men or women, there are some outstanding and talented individuals in sexual relationships. Although the content of this innate talent is not the same, men mostly refer to strong bodies, while women mostly have excellent minds. But no matter who, taking advantage of their own advantages, intentionally tampering with male-female relationships, or even intentionally damaging other people's families, is definitely a shameful existence. However, after several decades, looking back, it was found that there was still a certain degree of forgiveness. And the reason why I want to write about enduring pain, perhaps first of all, is to comfort the abnormal dead souls that I used to be familiar with. Yes, I really owe it. I had a brain tease when someone wanted to write a book. Nowadays, it seems like being forced by some force in the dark, not writing is not enough. When writing the draft, there was even a supernatural event, which strengthened my determination to continue writing. Unexpectedly, there may be many people who know their stories, but perhaps only I am willing to take notes. Just think of it as the sound of geese passing by. Chapter 1. Introduction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Who wants to play sequel? Let's start with it. Little slut. This woman is not really very good looking. She is not tall, thin and flat, with thin eyes, and can't be seen cold. She is an ordinary woman, except for one thing. White. But, durable, it still carries an ancestral charm. Don't let her get involved, whether you're single or married, just take it. As for why do we have to tell this woman first? Indeed, this woman is truly a woman of immense energy. As far as I know, 3 men and 1 woman died because of her, and 2 families disintegrated because of her. No, not just that. For decades, she has been stirring up the turmoil in the city where my parents live on her own. She is like the person in ancient Greek mythology who opened Pandora's box. From then on, marriage is no longer as sacred and inviolable as before. Divorce has gradually become a choice for many people. Instead of just being a man or woman in a simple marriage, with hidden thunder, it occasionally explodes in life, leading to more joys and sorrows. It has been said that the skills of a little slut are inherited, so of course, it must start with her parents. Otherwise, how can we prove their family background? In this way, the words have become too long. But if we don't talk about her parents, we can't understand her temperament. How could a man abandon his wife and children for her, wishing he could give his life to her so crazily? In times of prosperity, people are like pigs and dogs. Oh, everyone, don't think that living a happy life nowadays is really a matter of our own abilities. It's because we have good reincarnation skills. If reincarnation is not done at the right time, it's hard to say what kind of person one can become. For example, people who were reincarnated in the 1920s and 1930s were born into the era of warlordism and grew up in the turbulent times of national and ethnic turmoil. The story takes place in a place named after the Heavenly Wharf, where a couple who could not have been a couple. The 3 religions and 9 streams converge here, the most noble and shameless, the most kind and vicious, as if the black and white poles in the Tai Chi diagram are constantly fighting and transforming each other. Tianjin, with its authentic dock culture and a hub for waterway transportation, is also the hope of countless wandering people in the chaotic era. For example, various opera troupes must first pay homage to the old and young men of Tianjin before entering Beijing. If you make everyone feel that the heat is not enough and there is not enough flavor, don't go to the land of Beijing. Hurry up and go to a small place. Otherwise, it will be difficult to make a living in the imperial city where drinking water costs money. So in the theater here, there is an untimely liveliness. After you sing, I will appear, but there is no free time. As for national hatred and family feud, sigh, let's first consider our own mouth before we talk. Don't misunderstand, our little slut parents are not opera singers, but they did meet in the theater. Their first encounter was ordinary, and no one expected them to be together later. It can even be said that these two collaborators have spent their entire lives performing love-hate dramas, which are more complex, exciting, and diverse than what they had seen in the theater before. By way, it's the Bai family of Shnungling Silk and Satin Manor, not the eldest lady of the eldest lady. Why do you say that? She is the roommate brought back by her father from outside. Her biological mother gave birth to her and died due to difficult childbirth. Her father was unable to do so, so he had to take her home to be raised by her original wife. The original wife had a scene, but no matter how unhappy she was, she had to keep it. Not to mention back then, but now, in this situation, as long as a woman still thinks about it and her heart is not cold enough, she will not really throw away the innocent baby girl. In fact, it was just raised by the old maid, Mrs. Jean. It's said to be a young lady, which means there's no need to do anything, but in fact, there's no one to care about her. Her background is also undisclosed. She's probably like the white lion cat they keep at home, just eating and drinking. Chapter 2. Escaping the Siege. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yang Zi, this name seems to be just a casual name, and it is indeed true. Yang Zi remembers having a father, a mother, and a family when he was a child, but later he didn't know how he became a little beggar. Later on, Yang Zi made a living on the street near this theater and ran 2 errands for the owner of the theater. The boss saw that Yang Zi was quite clever, and coincidentally, a staff member resigned from the theater, so he called Yang Zi to take over. Yang Zi is thin, looking 15 or 16 years old. The only thing that looks decent is her fair and delicate appearance. Her mouth is not particularly sweet, but fortunately she is honest and has a mild temper. Originally, Yang Zibin was supposed to stay and serve in this theater, making a decent living. Regardless of the world, those who had nothing to do were all wealthy people. As long as you wait in this theater, you won't make a lot of money, but it's always okay to make ends meet. But there is something in human life, there will always be. God has never let anyone choose for themselves. Yang Zi knows Bai Wei, and this Miss Bai seems to be 1 or 2 years younger than Yang Zi. At that time, Bai Wei was not yet of sufficient stature and appeared young and weak, like a small willow tree that had just been plucked. With a hint of immaturity that had not yet faded away, he would take a yellow charter car to the theater every now and then to watch the play, which could be considered a regular customer. They just greeted each other when they met head-on. Huan Shi Igua, after listening to several plays and essays by princes, generals, and talented women, unconsciously, this young lady of the Bai family has also watched plays in this garden for almost 2 years. If there is any special intersection between Yang Zi and Bai Wei, it is probably that Miss Bai unintentionally helped Yang Zi relieve the siege. It's not a big deal either. If you often walk by the river, why don't you get your shoes wet? Although Yang Zi has been doing this job with all his heart and effort, there are always times when his spirit is weak and his mind is wandering. That day, when Yang Zi turned around, he didn't pay attention and stepped on someone else's face. If it were for normal times, just apologize for the inconvenience and say a few more comforting words, it would be over. But today, this master is just trying to make things difficult. No matter how Yang Zi apologizes, he just holds on to him and doesn't let go. How can he wear the new shoes that he just put on today if he gets dirty from stepping on them? Leng asked Yang Zi to compensate for a new pair. Don't look like it's just a pair of cloth shoes, I'm sorry, it's produced by the famous Niansheng Time. Honored brand in the city of Beiping, worth 2 pieces of glory. I can't afford to pay for the income calculated by Yang Zi. Just as the commotion was getting stiff, the master suddenly stopped talking to Yang Zi and involuntarily walked out the door, following the woman in front for half a street. Yes, the person this master is following is Bai Wei. Although Bai Wei has never attended school, the Bai family is also a family with some background, and the girls they raise are not comparable to the girls from ordinary families in the market. In modern terms, having a feminine taste, as Chao Gong said, is a natural and charming attitude. Today, Mr. Zhang, who is fussing around, runs a restaurant. It's not just about poor money, it's all about the soldiers and ruffians who eat the king's meal causing trouble. Those who carry guns don't pay after finishing their meal. You dare not force it, the key is that they didn't have a meal. It's said to be on credit, but it's been going on for years and months. Who can bear it? Today was purely Yang Zi's misfortune, and Zhang Yi was unhappy. As for why I happened to catch sight of Bai Wei, Zhang Yi's original wife had been dead for 3 years, and it happened to be about as angry as Yang Zi's. Her heart was flowing smoothly, and when I looked up, I happened to see the graceful Bai Wei passing by. Oh, I caught my eye. Mr. Zhang thinks this little lady can be trusted anywhere. Chapter 3. Looking at each other. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I didn't want to write too much about the parents of the little slut, but unfortunately, these two have been living their entire lives, almost surpassing others for 8 more lives. Their influence on the little slut is too great, and if they don't explain it clearly now, it's easy to confuse them later on. So, just be patient and read, and I'll write it as briefly as possible. It's true that there are too many stories about their family. If I don't write them down, I feel like I can't explain them clearly in the future. But it is said that Zhang Yi, who runs this restaurant, has been following Bai Wei for most of the street, watching her enter the Bai family's door with his own eyes. When he turned around, he invited a matchmaker to come and propose marriage, intending to officially marry her as a sequel. When Bai Wei found out, her father, Mr. Bai, had already agreed. He privately believes that this is a good family. After all, Bai Wei is not a serious miss of the Bai family. Without half of her mother's family background, the refined wealthy family cannot look up to her. Can you marry low? What does Bai Wei say? After all, she is also a child that Bai Lao Yi has been in pain for since childhood. She doesn't touch the sunshine with 10 fingers. Can you let her live with a company employee or a small business vendor, washing her hands and making soup every day? How could she? Bai Wei is afraid that even washing a bowl will shatter the ground. Here's a message of peace and prosperity for you. So, it's actually a good thing for Bai Wei to do continuation for others. Besides the older men, Bai Wei can still maintain his previous standard of living at least, isn't it? It must be admitted that Mr. Bai has put his heart into this daughter. Unfortunately, the good intentions of parents may not be fully understood by those who are children. Moreover, that month was a time of surging new trends, and many new schools opened in Beijing and Tianjin. Even if Bai Wei had not attended school, it did not mean that she was not influenced by the new trends. Young girls always have some social connections, did they? Bai Wei once again went to the theater to listen to the play, threw a few big boys at Yang Zi, and reminded him to let her know when Mr. Zhang, who runs the restaurant, arrived. Yang Zi naturally agreed, and there are actually quite a few such things. In this theater, there are also those idle people who specialize in this, helping male and female guests find each other who can see eye to eye, and connecting them to build bridges and settle in good places. Of course, Bai Wei just wanted to see what kind of man the family had ordered for her. It's not the Qing dynasty anymore, we can't still marry blindly like before. Even in ancient times, there was still a Sima Xiangru and Zhuo Wenjun. Everyone can guess that middle-aged men in their 30s are often unable to catch the eye of young girls who are just starting to fall in love. Especially this gentleman is not very particular. He shakes his legs. The habit of shaking legs is very, very taboo in our traditional etiquette. There is an old saying in ancient times that goes, when a tree shakes its leaves, its legs tremble and its blessings thin. The meaning is that if a tree keeps shaking, its leaves will fall off. If a person always likes to shake their legs, their lucky points will decrease. Bai Wei really hates this disease from the bottom of his bones. In the private room on the second floor, when Yang Zi pointed out Zhang Yi, who was watching a play under the stage, to Bai Wei, Zhang Yi was shaking his legs and beating the rhythm, following the singing style of the actors on stage, shaking his head and brain and humming. He was so happy. Of course, Mr. Zhang didn't know that Bai Wei was looking at him, and even if he did, he wouldn't pay much attention. He had already inquired and knew that Mr. Bai was satisfied with him. As for whether Bai Weishi likes him or not, it is not among his concerns. Marriage, the words of matchmakers ordered by parents, women can listen to them. Chapter 4. Risk Involvement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Don't be fooled by Bai Wei not having attended school for a whole day, but he himself is a clever child. She learned a little here and understood a little there, and also recognized some words through exposure. She also learned arithmetic by following Aunt Jane to buy things. Besides, which good person doesn't want to make progress? I heard that there are even girls from outside of Tianjin Weixin Women's School. People can come here specifically from such a far place to study. What are they looking for? It's not just about striving for progress. Some young people who pursue progress even openly divorce their old-fashioned rural wives and marry foreign students who attend church schools. What is a marriage that requires love, not a marriage arranged by feudal parents? Originally, Bai Wei was not so averse to the marriage arranged by his family. However, when he saw this Mr. Zhang today, his illness happened to be something that Bai Wei has always despised. After much thought, I couldn't convince myself, let alone persuade myself to endure. People, we can't let things go in our hearts. Once something is left behind, one is likely to become restless and prone to making mistakes in a confused manner. So no matter who it is, any indecisive matter hanging in their hearts, quickly find a way to solve it as soon as possible. Whether you want to compromise on your own or negotiate with someone, if you can solve it a day earlier, don't procrastinate. If you procrastinate, you won't regret it. Mr. Zhang really didn't come up with a plan. He thought that a marriage that was almost certain would become an exception for Bai Wei here. Since the day Bai Wei met Zhang Yi in the theater and discovered his leg-shaking problem, he has been restless. Bai Wei felt disgusted in her heart, but she didn't have the courage to tell her father, Mr. Bai, to refuse this marriage. She is an illegitimate girl born out of wedlock, and it is rare for her to marry into a wealthy old household as the main wife, even if it is just a continuation of the marriage. It is much better than marrying at a lower level. Even Grandma Zhen is happy for her, it's rare to say. Mr. Zhang is young and strong, and there are no elders rubbing and grinding people above him. Bai Wei can be the master of the family by entering the door, without being angry with her mother-in-law. This is something that many women cannot envy. If Bai Wei refuses this marriage, in the eyes of everyone, she would be so ignorant. Bai Wei has been thinking about how to tell her father these days that her conservative father can change his mind and not marry her to that Zhang Yi. Bai Wei lost his mind in such a daze and walked into a small alley that he would never normally enter on the street. When Bai Wei regained his senses, he found that the cake was terrible. She hasn't been to this alley before, so there are two thugs in front who don't seem to be good people. Bai Wei saw the other party, and they also saw her. Bai Wei panicked and turned around to run. Bai Wei, a delicate woman, can't run away from the thugs and thugs who spend their days wandering the streets. Soon, Bai Wei was sandwiched back and forth by these two people, blocked in the alley and unable to move forward or backward. I'm afraid of returning home, but my background has given me some confidence. I can still say some scary things. For example, bold. How dare you stop me? Do you know who my father is? Open your dog eyes and see clearly. Dare to stretch your paws randomly, be careful that my father knows he has chopped you. For a while, these two people were really intimidated by Bai Wei. There's nothing else, Bai Wei is dressed in the latest patterns of silk and satin. Those two goods wander the world, and judging people by their clothes, They are really afraid of offending people who shouldn't be offended. You can always find joy, but there is only one life. However, the opportunity is fleeting and I am not willing to let this little lady go like this. Chapter 5. Saving Danger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Otherwise, why do our ancestors always say that every coincidence cannot be written? Bai Wei was blocked in the alley by those two thugs and couldn't get away when Yang Zi was sent out by his boss to buy things. Yang Zi specifically picked small alleys to save a few steps. Just like this, I happened to see Bai Wei being sandwiched back and forth by those two thugs, unable to move forward or backward. Yang Zi, who had worked as a beggar before, knew a little about the entrance of Tianjin Weimatu. Coincidentally, this Bai Wei also had the same surname as the famous Bai boss. Yang Zi shouted from a long distance, "Miss Bai, why did you come here? It's almost noon now, hurry back. Your servant was looking for you just now." Bai Wei happened to take this opportunity and walked towards Yang Zi while answering, "Hey, I'm going back now." While those two ruffians were confused and unsure of what to do, Bai Wei followed Yang Zi quickly out of the alley. As soon as they turned a corner and couldn't see the outside, the two of them couldn't help but hold hands and run towards the main street. Sigh, girls need to pay special attention to safety. No matter when, one should always have the consciousness of being a weak woman and try not to go to the underworld with fewer people. This is the first time these two unlucky children have encountered such a thing. Sayako just keeps running without caring, not even daring to turn her head back, let alone know if those two people have chased after her. Yang Zi and Bai Wei ran all the way to the main street, gasping for breath as they watched the bustling crowds come and go. Only then did they settle down, look up for direction, and walk back together. However, the men, women, and children who came towards them all looked at them with surprised eyes, making these two people inexplicable. Yang Zi and Bai Wei came to their senses and looked at each other. Ah. 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 Why are they still tightly holding each other's hands? Oh my goodness. No wonder they look at them both with that kind of gaze. I must have mistaken them for those shameless new-style men and women like Meng Lang. What should I do? The two of them were so scared that they both shook their hands and didn't take them off at once. It turned out to be too tight, too scared, and both of them had cramps in their hands. They had to break it off before they could let go. Yang Zi's hands were nothing, but on his slightly white and tender little hands, there were clear traces of green and red. Yang Zi's face turned red and he hesitated to apologize to Bai Wei. Bai Wei is an understanding person. How could he accept his apology? Instead, he kept saying to Yang Zi, "I should have thanked you, you just saved me. I should have thanked you. If I hadn't happened to meet you just now, I wouldn't have known what would have happened." The fate between men and women, no one can guess how it came about, whether it was deep or shallow. Just like them, two vastly different people, who would have thought they could entangle together for decades in the future. At that time, people adhered to established rules, and men and women were still very cautious in their defense. Although things were urgent and power was exercised, for Yang Zi, in his humble life of 17 or 8 years old, it was only this time that he was closest to a girl of comparable age. It's not scientific to say you don't want anything at all, but it's even more unrealistic to say you really want something. The gap in family background is clearly visible. Is it useful just to think? He Yang Zi, a poor and useless young man serving in the theater, why would he marry the young lady of Shengxinglong Silk and Satin Manor, who is well known throughout Tianjin? It's better to greet everyone who comes to listen to the play well than to be idle and pondering. Maybe you'll get a reward, even if it's just a few big kids going out to buy some delicious big meat buns. It can improve your life more practically. Chapter 6. Understanding Emotions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yang Zi and Bai Wei, these two children, have only become more familiar with this matter. When we meet again, it's still my nephew playing lanterns. Or just greeting each other. Yang Zi knew that his identity was low, and seeing Bai Wei's delicate and graceful appearance, no matter how much he liked it, he clearly knew that he didn't deserve it. I only dare to think about it in my heart, when comforting myself before bedtime, and nothing else. Although Bai Wei has a good impression of Yang Zi, a handsome and warm-hearted young man, he understands the gap between himself and Yang Zi. She stretched out her clothes, opened her mouth to eat, and the clothes in her wardrobe changed every day. Even the young lady of the Bai family, who couldn't finish wearing them all, could never marry Yang Zi, a poor person. The world is unpredictable, but how could the heavens sincerely gather these two people together and find out what happened if there was nothing else? Since obtaining the approval of Mr. Bai, Mr. Zhang had to run to the Bai family as the prospective son-in-law of the Bai family, and also learn to date his fiancée A.E. from those modern young people at that time. Since Bai Wei was scared in the alley last time, he hasn't had much energy to solve this problem for a while. She is small and thin-skinned, unable to withstand the pressure from her parents at home, the earnest persuasion from Aunt Chen, and the shameless entanglement from Mr. Zhang. She has to come out of 3 or 5 appointments once or twice. Bai Wei's reserved demeanor was quite in line with the style of a lady from a wealthy family, and it even made Zhang's heart itch. Once in a private room on the 2nd floor of the theater, Mr. Zhang looked at this white micro and liked it more and more. He couldn't control his own hands and went to pull the girl's sleeve, trying to pull her tender little hand. Bai Wei had already reluctantly followed Mr. Zhang out, but seeing his anxious expression, he couldn't help but look down on him. As he refused, he scolded him in a low voice, "Mr. Zhang, what are you doing? I am the innocent daughter of a serious family. How could Mr. Zhang get drunk in broad daylight without drinking? What does he look like pulling around like?" Yang Zi felt a bit sour when they came in together, intentionally or unintentionally keeping an eye on them. At this moment, I was standing outside the curtain with my ears perked up. When I heard Bai Wei's words, my heart was as sour as soaking in vinegar. Yang Zi impulsively took a step and lifted the curtain, carrying a teapot inside. He nodded and said, "Sir, I'll add some tea for you." Mr. Zhang was interrupted by Yang Zisheng in his excitement, but he couldn't say anything nitpicking. "This place is like this, it's not a brothel or a mansion. Blame him for not choosing the right place. If it's in a modern cinema, it's pitch black. What do you want to do without anyone bothering you? Miscalculation." Mr. Zhang saw that Bai Wei was extremely angry and his face turned blue. He twisted his body and took the opportunity to leave. His delicate and angry little appearance was so beloved in his heart for a moment. "Hurry up and stop Bai Wei, then give Yang Zi a reward to go out quickly and not get in the way. While bending down and bowing to compensate, be careful, you're just about to hit yourself with 2 big-eared melon seeds. Alas, this man, why did you bother to come? If you like it, can't you be polite and polite? I still have to learn from foreign people to talk about love and romance, but unfortunately, I can't control my own emotions and etiquette. But, they often just eat women's tricks. The more a woman is so indifferent, the more she holds and pinches, and the more men tend to get hung up. Cheap goods are not good, rushing is not buying or selling. Women are so eager to refuse and welcome, making it difficult for people to feel their pulse, and men often feel even more itchy and flustered." Chapter 7. Bombing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. How about in ancient times, daughters were not allowed to go out casually? Not that men know men the best. It's easy for you to see, where else is there any sense of mystery? Where else is there anything valuable to talk about? Mr. Zhang happily calculated how to marry Bai Wei into the door earlier. At this moment, no matter what, one would never think that sometimes there must be in life, and there must be no time in life, so don't force yourself. No matter how much you like it, it's not yours. In the last century, decades before the founding of the People's Republic of China, the reason why it was called a chaotic era was that in the blink of an eye, you were no longer you, not just your identity, family background, wealth. instantly disappeared, and even precious life disappeared. With the increasingly dense whistling sound and a deafening explosion, unprepared, it suddenly arrived. The dock of the Emperor was still bombed when the country was accumulating poverty and weakness. The place where I just sang and danced became a human purgatory in the blink of an eye. Amidst the chaos, Yang Zi seemed to have gotten used to it or just pulled Bai Wei and ran away. Where are we going? I don't know anyway, just run away. You can't just sit idly by, can you? The huge whistling and explosive sounds continued to ring, and these two children were just running together. Unable to catch my breath, I sat down on the roadside panting uncontrollably. Wait for a moment to slow down a bit, the airplane with the ointment flag hovering over in the sky, and these two children will continue to run. This big bombing didn't end until it was completely dark. On this day, countless ordinary people of Tianjin lost their loved ones, homes, and old days, relying on their businesses for survival, and even their lives. Zhang Yi, who instinctively managed to crawl back to his own restaurant, was sitting there crying loudly, but he was not the most miserable. His restaurant was bombed to a pulp, and the remaining fire was still burning on the wooden beams, doors, and windows. The chefs, waiters, and even guests in the restaurant have long lost their vitality. They collapsed in the ruins, covered in dust. Some were still carrying collapsed beams on their bodies, while others lay at the entrance of the restaurant, their arms extended out of the door, just one step away from vitality, but they fell there forever. Pulled by Yang Zi, Bai Wei somehow ran back to the Bai family. Faced with the Bai mansion, which was almost unrecognizable after being bombed into ruins, he was completely dumbfounded. What does it mean to cry without tears? That's it, the changes are so big that you can't even react. By family, there are dozens of people from top to bottom, including the master and servants. Say no, it's just gone. At this moment, Bai Wei couldn't hear anything, let alone think. Yang Zi is actually a person who has been punished before. He is quite clear-headed and heard someone shouting to run quickly. The devils have killed someone. He pulled Bai Wei and ran along the crowd. Yang Zi didn't waste his years as a little beggar, he still has the ability to run and hide from others. Yang Zi pulled Bai Wei and crossed the alley, jumping off the earthen wall. He picked up a small path that others didn't pay attention to and ran. Before long, he ran to another street. Coincidentally, there is a branch of the silk shop owned by the Bai family on this street. The old shopkeeper, who has gone through the vicissitudes of life, is about to lock the door and find his boss. Whether to close or open, he always has to ask his boss for a definite idea. At this moment, Bai Wei was being pulled by a guy-like boy, his eyes hooked and empty. The old man opened his mouth but didn't say anything else. He just said, "Wait for me." He then turned around and got into the shop, wrapped a bag of silver dollars in a handkerchief, and handed it to Bai Wei. "Miss, take care." Chapter 8. Escape for Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The old shopkeeper nodded at Yang Zi again, patted his shoulder, and said, "Miss, please leave." Yang Zi slowly regained his composure and returned to the old shopkeeper, saying, "Take care of yourself too. We just came over from the Bai family, it's gone." I don't know where the piercing sound of gunfire rang out, but Yang Zi's whole body was stirred up and he pulled up Bai Wei and ran away. Fortunately, these two children didn't delay at all. If they were like some people who hesitated and couldn't bear to tidy up, perhaps their lives would be entrusted to the Tianjin Guard. Escape for life, what is more valuable than a person? Even yesterday, the old shopkeeper wouldn't have acted like this. But today, the bomb exploded and left her arms and limbs flying all over the sky. In a hellish scene, although Bai Wei was disheveled and her face was dirty, she was tightly pulled by the boy and had to wear her entire tail. Asking or not asking, what has happened before and what can happen? What need to be pursued in such a chaotic world? That boy kept pulling her and taking good care of her, didn't he? Moreover, the Bai family is very close to the city hall, with the most bombs dropped and the most devastating ones. Even without Yang Zi's advice, the old shopkeeper could have guessed 8, 9, or even 10, and even speculated that there might not be anyone else in the Bai family. Otherwise, how could the elderly person act on their own and directly give them money from the cabinet after seeing them? At that time, the only words I could think of as a migrant worker, including professional ethics, personal qualities, loyalty and maintenance to their employer, were probably professional, but of course, that was not accurate enough. In short, the money given by the old shopkeeper allowed Yang Zi and Bai Wei to spend perhaps the most peaceful, sweet and warm days of their lives. Those sweetness always made them feel healed in the pain that was invisible behind them. No matter how difficult the world is, it can withstand it. This pair of inexperienced children have no independent opinions. Where do they want to go and where do they want to go, where do they know? Just following the crowd and riding freely. The only way to persist is to keep walking and not stop. They eat, they also eat, they take the train, they also take, they board the ship, they also board the ship. Since seeing Bai Gongguan disappear with his own eyes, Bai Wei has been unable to speak. Even if he eats, he still needs Yang Zi to feed his mouth before chewing and swallowing. It seems that he only lives by instinct, just like a wooden person. They didn't settle down until they arrived in a bustling big city and rented a nice-looking small house with a courtyard in a small alley. Yes, this place has been praised by countless literati and courtesans for thousands of years, and it has always been renowned for its ability to raise daughters. Its transportation is also very convenient, which is really good. Well, it also depends on who it is for. The stimulation that Bai Wei received didn't seem to come to her mind until that night when Yang Zi boiled water and asked her to take a shower. Along the way, Yang Zi treated her like a daughter, even if someone said she was foolish, he didn't leave her alone. This time, his son, who had lost his family, left his hometown, and been chased by other races, rushed in helplessly. Suddenly, Bai Wei opened his mouth and wailed before crying twice. He didn't catch a breath and passed out. Yang Zi quickly pinched her while soothing her chest. How did he do it? I have seen too much along the way. The life and death, joys and sorrows that I have seen on the road these days are really making me wish my eyes were blind. It's so good not to see them. So much so that he wished he could be like Bai Wei, even better if he were foolish. The person who looks and feels soberly is the most painful and uncomfortable. Chapter 9. Temporary Residence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Contrary to his wishes, on the way to escape, Yang Zi couldn't be foolish, let alone killed by the explosion. Even though sometimes the bomb was about to fall and he was too tired to bear it, he simply stopped and waited to die, but the bomb avoided them like long eyes. Yang Zi still pulled Bai Wei. Yang Zi wanted to cry, but also found it funny. He couldn't understand why he had to hold on to Bai Wei and never give up. At that time, people still held on to some things deep down, even though Yang Zi and Bai Wei had not attended school for a day, those things were like engraved in the bone marrow, integrated into the blood, and rooted in the heart. Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, trustworthiness, gentleness, courtesy, frugality, loyalty, filial piety, courage, humility, and honesty. These basic moral principles for being a person, which serve as ethical principles, are actually the principles of rational communication, empathy, and harmony among all members of society. Bai Wei cried bitterly and finally accepted the reality that his family was already in ruins. People, naturally, become reserved. When running for his life, Bai Wei suffered from heartbreak. It's not an exaggeration to be close to Yang Zi. In special circumstances, who can be harsh with him? However, now that Bai Wei has regained consciousness and returned to the right track of life, his behavior naturally has to follow the rules. Yang Zi is always her lifesaver, isn't she? Where else can you trouble someone like before? Even if there was indeed a slight ambiguity between the two before, it was just a bit. If Yang Zi didn't take the initiative to expose it for a day, things had to remain the same. Should Bai Wei make a commitment with her own body? If the Bai family is still alive during normal times, Bai Wei can indeed promise to save lives. I believe Yang Zi will also gladly accept it. But during wartime, when the war is chaotic, women, especially weak and useless orphaned women, are simply a burden. At this time, Bai Wei is begging for a living with Yang Zi. Have you asked someone if they are willing or not? Although Bai Wei has never attended school or received education, his family, including the head and servants, was once a bustling family. There are many people, how can things not be many? Bai Wei often goes out to watch a play, but doesn't she want to hide in peace? So, even though Yang Zi didn't express his implicit regret, how could Bai Wei, who is used to seeing lawsuits, not see it? Ko Bai Wei, what can we do? Bai Wei has reached this point, and Yang Zi didn't discuss with Bai Wei before, so he pulled him from Tianjin Wei all the way here, right? Of course, Bai Wei cannot say these words, otherwise he would be too ignorant. Yang Zi goes out every day to find work, Bai Wei. He always needs to make sure that Yang Zi comes back tonight, so that his heart can be slightly relieved. A young yellow flower girl named Bai Wei, who is unfamiliar with her place of life, stays alone in an empty room. She is afraid. If the silver dollars given by the old shopkeeper were in an era of stable prices, it would not be a problem for them to live peacefully for 3 or 2 years. But now, these prices can double in just a few days, and I don't know when they will be used. Fortunately, silver is a hard currency, much more appealing than those gold coins, and people are willing to buy things. However, the anxiety felt due to the confusion about the future keeps everyone's heart hanging, not in decline. Yang Zi's heart was also tormented by the inability to find a job. Yang Ziban thought that with a young man of his prime and a fair appearance, he could never find a living to make a living. Who would have thought that when Yang Zilian went to work as a waiter in a restaurant, they only needed locals, and they also had to have locals as security guards. That recruitment station is open to all men. Yang Zi heard their propaganda about defending his country and restoring the rivers and mountains, and his voice was filled with blood. Chapter 10. Snuggling Up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yang Zi wants to inquire about the benefits of being a soldier. As we walked towards the military station, we heard 2 hunchbacked veteran soldiers, Yuzi, speaking with a bent shoulder. A. Why don't you pay attention to those new little bunnies? B. Why bother? They're all ghosts. A. No, you have a problem, right? You're all lively and lively. Where did the ghost come from? B. If I can't fight 2 battles, everything will become cannon fodder. What are ghosts? Or are they short-lived ghosts who are in a hurry to reincarnate? What do I know about them? Do I think I have enough yang energy? It was clear and sunny, with the sun hanging above his head, but Yang Zi felt as if he had been splashed all over by the icy water in the winter's 12th lunar month, and even the back of his neck felt cold. By the time Yang Zi returned to his home in the alley, it had been several more days. Yang Zi was so scared that he was about to leave his body floating when he walked. Being chased by bombs dropped on the plane, Yang Zi didn't even hear those 2 veteran soldiers use these words today, which made him so scared. Sometimes, people are like this, in a situation where they are not aware of the danger. Once someone tells them the truth, their hair will stand on end. Yang Zi didn't even know how long he had been wandering outside, so he came back home based on his muscle memory. There were no lights in the house, the courtyard was pitch black, and Yang Zi didn't expect anyone to wait for him. Yang Zi has been very indifferent to Bai Wei these days. He just said hello after breakfast and left. When he returned at night, he lay down on the bed and went to sleep. Yang Zi lives in the outer room, while Bai Wei lives in the inner room. If Bai Wei doesn't come out, he won't be able to meet Yang Zi. Today, as soon as Yang Zi collapsed on the bed, he heard the door of the inner room lightly ring. The door seemed to have been left with a crack until it was confirmed that Yang Zi had returned, and then it quickly closed with a creaking sound, and then there was no movement. It's also possible that it wasn't because the inner door rang, and Yang Zi thought he heard it wrong. In no time, there was a faint cry coming from inside the room, as if it had been blocked by a handkerchief or something, but it couldn't be completely stopped. There were still intermittent, delicate and gentle cries. They overflowed the door in this quiet night and drifted into the ears of the young man outside, sticky and itchy like wet raindrops falling from the sky. Human beings are inherently social animals, and when one person stays, they will consciously or unconsciously seek out another person. Some nights, I just don't want to sleep alone, especially when encountering significant emotional fluctuations that can cause serious emotions. The young men and women who were undisturbed were already somewhat flirtatious, and the timing was just right. Bai Wei was afraid, and Yang Zi was also afraid. The two of them rolled together, but couldn't remember being afraid anymore. The ancestor said that the heavens are dry and the earth is Kuan, and that the harmony of yin and yang is the right path. Yang Zi and Bai Wei, with their young and lively bodies, sought and comforted each other. They tasted the most beautiful enchanting fruit in the world, as if they had finally connected the Ren and Du meridians, and their hearts were at ease. It's not just anyone who has suffered, in the midst of mountains and rivers, it's much worse than them. A car must have a way to the front of the mountain, and a boat will naturally go straight to the bridge. God will always leave a way for people to survive. Besides, they still have more than $10 of ocean in their hands. What are they afraid of? During that period, Yang Zi and Bai Wei were like all newlywed couples, talking obscene love words that could not be heard by a third party, and doing some necessary love affairs to pass on the family line. No matter how much wind and rain outside, at least in this world, Yang Zi and Bai Wei are sweetly intertwined. If there was anything more touching about the two of them, it would probably be that their emotions were strong and sincere at that time.